Welcome to Stories, a show where we share conversations with founders shaping society and culture. My name is Jonathan.
My name is Tim.
So recently we got a lot of newfound interest from America because of a recent episode we did with Speaks founder Andrew Xu. So we figured maybe we should do a little quick introduction of ourselves. So my name is Jonathan, like I said, and we both grew up in Taiwan. We spent some time in the States. I went to school in Purdue. I did mechanical engineering, work as a sales more or less for the last 5 years since 2020, and had the chance to come back to Taiwan in 2023. Tim and I actually ended up spending quite a few Friday lunches hanging out in 2023 to ultimately figure out for 2024 what we want to do as a new sort of initiative, new project was this podcast. And over the last year plus or so, we sort of continue to reposition ourselves, kind of finding our product market fit in a way to sort of evolve into where we are now, right? And essentially right now, what Stories is that we want to show all of our audience, doesn't really matter where you are, we want to show all the audience that regardless of your sort of family background, academia background, or even your early professional careers, as long as you have a clear sort of sense of mission and purpose where you want to go, as long as you keep working at it, you'll be there. We want to achieve that by inviting all sorts of different successful founders onto our show and essentially highlight the fact that as much as they're really successful now and being, getting all the reputation boost, getting all the highlights, spotlights, there's a lot of struggles behind. And the stories are not a single path, right? The path to success can have quite a few different variations to it. It's not like you had to go to all the top colleges or have the best job to start. It's just more about you as a person, as a founder, what your mindset is, your drive, and that's why we're doing the show. So over to you, Tim.
Yeah. So my name is Tim, and like Jonathan said, we are high school classmates, and we both went to school in the States. I went to the University of Virginia, studied economics, and due to COVID, had to come back to Taiwan in 2020. And then I worked at a fintech startup for a couple of years. And right now I am doing investments at a family office. Just like Jonathan said, I guess in 2023, there was a period of time where both of us were kind of, I wouldn't say lost, but looking for a clear path forward in the situation that we were in, which is just being in Taiwan. And throughout our conversations, we felt like this was a great opportunity, not only for ourselves, but also to build like sort of a platform for our Taiwanese-based listeners and listeners abroad to really get a firsthand conversation with founders that many people don't have the opportunity to do. So in conclusion, I feel like over the past year or so, we've really both not only learned a lot, but also built a lot of really good connections with all these founders and really got to learn.
Our audience too.
And our audiences too. And really got to learn the fact that the path to success is not a straight line, right? Just like you said. And as producer and host of this show, I feel like over the past year or so, we've definitely learned a lot. And honestly, I'm quite happy with where we are right now, but really excited about where we're going.
Yeah, I think recently, the last few months, we've been gaining a lot of momentum. Yeah, so over the last year plus, with all the work we put in, we are very fortunate to have the chance to share our time with Speaks co-founder Andrew. And as part of the preparation we did for Andrew, we sort of uncover a lot of the things that might have been forgotten from decades ago. Because of the time constraint we may have during the conversation, we feel like to really do Andrew's story justice is to spend another hour or so sort of talking about some of his past experience. If this episode is the first time you hear about Speak is essentially one of the most exciting AI startup now in the world. So in the past, there's a bunch of different language learning apps. And what Speak has been doing since 2016 is they are sort of aiming to use AI to educate people on how to speak fluently in English much faster. And As AI evolves, they've been able to break out of just learning English. They can learn whatever language you want essentially. Right now, we're located in Taiwan. Speak has become a very very household name. So when we got the chance to talk to Andrew, we were very excited. What Speak really does is essentially you get an app and you get to speak to it as if the AI is just your personal tutor. It will jump in and make correction to you, but ultimately, it is using all sorts of different scenarios to teach their users to speak English loudly in private without the fear of making mistakes. And in likely a few hundred lessons or so, you can sort of have all the right context, right conversation notes in whatever scenarios you're in. So, for example, if you're watching the video now, we got a book on the table, which we'll talk about in a bit. That is the sort of the main spotlight for the day. And maybe it will say a book, right, as a very early lesson. And sort of the more advanced might be a book on the table. And perhaps the next tier up for the lessons might be a book on the table in a studio. So as the sentence complexity is being built up, that's sort of how Speak is able to educate their users on how to speak English fluently. And essentially the same is applied to whether you're learning Spanish, Italian, French, German, and so on. Even Japanese and Korean, I believe. But what really fascinated both Tim and I is that as we were preparing for our conversation with Andrew, we discovered this book he wrote when he was just 13 or 14.
Absolutely incredible.
We'll share the background of this book and the content because I believe that's out of print, both in English and Chinese. And you'll realize how interconnected Andrew's story was since he was just 10 years old to what he's doing now. We really feel like there's so much correlation to it that we must do this episode.
Absolutely. After finishing the book, I honestly feel like there are so many parallels from what he's doing now to like what he has been doing since he was a kid. Jonathan, why don't you start us off? Tell us what happened when he's a child.
So before we jump in, if you haven't listened to our full conversation with Andrew, you should go back 2 episodes and listen to that full conversation before you come in here, because we feel like that will really give you the best experience and the full context of what's about to happen. So in 1991, Andrew was born, and really before he was 4 years old, he was raised by his grandparents in Taiwan. And because of his parents' businesses and their work, they moved to Seattle. In the book, Andrew actually talked about from all the different side stories that his parents shared with him. It was shown at a very early age that Andrew was incredible in his reading and memorizing. He was able to just absorb all the new ideas, new knowledge very, very quickly. Essentially, he was encouraged to pursue all the curiosity he had as a kid. So his family was able to foster that environment for him. But very quickly, he went on to an elementary school on Mercer Island, and he sort of was a troubled kid in a way, but that's mostly because he was so smart. He absorbed all the knowledge and he finished all the homework at school so quickly. And as a child would, when you have nothing to do, you start bugging others.
Oh, he was just trying to have fun.
Yeah, he was just trying to have fun. So ultimately, the teacher had to bring the parents in and tell them that Andrew was just very smart.
Right.
So he was able to skip a few grades very quickly.
Yeah.
And within a few years, they moved to this little town on the east side called Issaquah.
So when they moved to Issaquah, the parents decided to homeschool Andrew, which really opened up, I think, the floodgates for him in terms of knowledge and his curiosity. Before, when he was at a traditional elementary school, he was basically limited by his age, right? He was able to learn everything there is to learn, and then
like within 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, and then somehow, because he's a kid, he needs to find something to do, right? So he begins to cause trouble here and there. But he's a kid. Like, you can't really blame him. There were signs of genius even at elementary school because he was dealing these Pokemon cards at a very young age. That shows signs of entrepreneurship right there. When he was in 4th grade honors class, there was this exercise that the teacher initiated. So the teacher had this currency system, which was sort of like an award system for the kids whoever was able to answer questions or be of help to other kids were rewarded with this paper gold star currency. And with this currency, you're able to exchange gifts that the teacher had prepared.
Yeah, and I think like one day the student just walked into the class and noticed a full table full of
Yeah.
different toys, and they were all really excited.
Yeah, the teacher really showed like the prize first and then told them about the whole structure of the game. But Andrew, being as smart as he is, was able to earn like 13 gold stars, I think, within the first couple of days. During this exercise, he came up with this, I guess, prank that he decided to draw up this fake currency and then put it back into the cashier's drawer without people noticing. But then at the same time, he also signed his name on the back of the paper coin. So when the teacher found out, the teacher didn't really know what to say as well, because like Andrew didn't use the coin to purchase any gifts and he had enough coins as is. But the teacher obviously was very angry because that is unethical to a certain degree. But when the parents learned about this, the reaction of his parents was really special. They didn't yell at him. Their reaction was they actually expected it, right? Because they know Andrew's smart. They know he's going to get into trouble here and there. And they're actually happy that Andrew got into trouble when he was a kid and when the consequences are relatively low. So I think when Andrew got that response from his parents, that actually kept, I think, to a certain level, kept his level of curiosity alive, right? Like, I'm sure there was some sort of reasoning behind his action when he did it, but he couldn't even remember himself upon reflection. And then throughout this whole exercise, it was very obvious to me that Andrew is very competitive. Like I said earlier, like within the first couple of days, he was able to gain the most gold stars within the class.
A fun fact here is that out of all the prizes that were on the table, what drew Andrew's attention the most was actually a trilobite fossil. For some reason, he was just very fascinated with the sort of biological front,
Right.
and just like being out in nature, because I think their family goes out to the nature for hikes quite often. And there are some other more interesting prizes that might have attracted little kids, but the fossil was ultimately what he wanted the most.
Yeah, and he ended up getting it, right? Because he was so competitive. He won all the stars that he could, and he was able to exchange that. I think he also had a lot of the paper currency left, and was able to exchange other gifts as well. But yeah, this competitiveness of him really spilled over and really showed when he began training with the swimming team at Mercer Island.
Yeah, Andrew's start with swimming was sort of a coincidence. I think when they first moved to Mercer Island, their family sort of just was walking into a swim club just for fun, and one of the coaches there were like, "Hey, why don't you just give it a shot? Just do a quick tryout." And Andrew being Andrew, he loves trying new things and jumping there. Apparently, he did pretty well, and the coach was like, "You're on the team." But for the parents, they were like, "No, no, no. We sort of just want Andrew to have a physical activity that can keep him busy. You know, get his physical up. But as part of the swimming team's regulation, you do need to compete in all the different swim meets. And Seattle being Seattle, it is swimming is one of the more popular sports as well. But little Andrew, what he thought of was, okay, if I weren't here for practice, I'm here for the team. As part of the team, I'm going to compete. Not only does he want to compete and outperform his own teammates, outperform his competitors in the pool from other teams, he saw there's a little leaderboard on top that he wants to beat all the records up there. Within a few years, Andrew essentially surpassed all these different records after training. But I think what's most impressive is that really all the work Andrew and his family put in behind the scenes to swimming as an individual sport to bring his level up. I think throughout the book, Andrew mentioned quite a few times that intellectually he was very, very far ahead of his peers. And given that, sure, it's about the reading speed, the memorizing skills, and all that. But ultimately, when it comes to sports, he was sort of limited by the body size, which is sort of tied to the age. So his dad, David, and his mom, Joyce, really put in a lot of work to help improve his game. And his brother, Patrick, younger brother, Patrick, at the time, was also doing swimming. So what they would do on the weekends was they would go into the pool, they would practice, but the parents are very involved as well. Somehow, his dad, David, got a camera that operates under the water. And this, keep in mind, this is like late 1990s. It's not like, all the tech is super advanced. So he was able to film Andrew and ultimately Patrick as well underwater, filming their, how they were kicking water, how the strokes were, how they were doing the turns. And they would go back, look at the tape, analyze. Like it's a proper top level athlete training.
It's very Michael Jordan-esque if you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
From the fact that he saw the billboards, the record board, and wanted to break all the records, and is like focused on game tape.
Oh yeah, totally. And ultimately, not only did he surpass all the billboards records that were on the team, he continued to PR himself as well.
Right.
So towards the end of his sort of swimming career, he was actually placed top 4 in 100 yards butterfly in America by the time he was like 12 or 13 years old. And a lot of his best friends from early childhood all came from the swimming team. They ended up representing Washington State to compete on a national level as well, which was a pretty interesting experience because I think that was one of the first time all these little kids were to be able to go on to a trip on their own without their parental supervision. And he had a great time. So great that they lost a lot of sleep and didn't really place too properly. But I think it's worth it to say that in the book, he mentioned that at the time, there were 3 best friends, Kyle, Sean, and Owen, that were frequent to each other's houses. They are competitors in the swimming pools, but essentially very, very close friends when they are out in each other's homes. So when we talked to Andrew, that was the 3 names that we shared during the very first part of our chat. I believe Kyle, Sean, and Owen, they all went on to big colleges to compete on the collegiate level too. So we can really reasonably assume that if Andrew were to pursue swimming on his own, he could probably be a top athlete in that as well. So bringing back to elementary school time, when he was still in school, by 4th grade, he was only 8 years old. Essentially, he was already outpacing the curriculum by a lot. And at that point, the parents, Dave and Joyce, realized that this is just not a solution for him. Despite this limitation or restriction that school system has for how far you can jump ahead, Dave and Joyce ultimately made the conscious decision to pull him out of school and started homeschooling. But they didn't make that decision randomly too. They consulted with a lot of different friends and families, some of the local homeschool folks. I think in America right now, there's over 1.5 million students that are being homeschooled. So naturally in Seattle, there are quite a few organizations helping this effort. With many careful conversations with different homeschool families and the tutors in those organizations, they made the decision to pull them out of the school system.
Yeah, and I think at the very beginning, the parents bought a lot of the textbooks from bookstores and whatnot, and then hired tutors. But very quickly, again, Andrew was able to really download all the information and internalize it very quickly. It got to a point where Andrew sort of like outlearned the system. So the parents had to look for another solution. But also, I think being homeschooled, the parents were really afraid that the social aspect of going to school was missing. But as you said earlier, there were organizations that help with this homeschooling effort. And a program that Andrew and his family was part of is called the Legacy Co-op program. The program really provided a spot where all the homeschool kids could socialize and hang out. But at the same time, they also had these like learning sessions and presenting and opportunities for kids to present their work.
When I was reading the book, I think during his time homeschooling, there was a very interesting part where in Legacy Co-op program, there was a class about Shakespeare. And he and his brother both were very interested in that particular class. And really, surprisingly, by 8 or 9 years old, both Andrew and Patrick have finished all Shakespeare work ever.
That's
And
crazy.
by that time, they went to all different libraries to rent out Shakespeare's plays from the past and read up on it. So I thought that was very fascinating. And I think this is also the part where Andrew and Patrick's brilliance are very, very well supported by the support system around them. So when they went to the Shakespeare class, when they were signing up for classes, the class is led by a lady called Miss Borden. And despite of the young age that Andrew and Patrick had at the time, I believe it was 8 or 9 years old, their mom Joyce sort of petitioned for them to get in, wanted to see if they are permitted. And because it's legacy co-op program, they are supporting all sorts of different homeschooling kids. Ms. Borden was actually very open to the idea for them to join. And really out of that story, what drew my interest was that the final project for the Shakespeare class was to create some sort of those science fair boards. Like you can choose a topic that you like. Ultimately, it has to be about Shakespeare. So Andrew had an idea that he wanted to create a biopic for Shakespeare, but that would be in a video form. So he went up to Miss Borden and be like, hey, this is what I want to do. Would that be okay? Miss Borden surprisingly was like, yeah, sure, just do what you want. Ultimately it's about doing the work, putting in the time and effort to research and really understand what and who Shakespeare was and the sort of value he represented.
Right.
So Andrew was very excited about the opportunity, and he began going to all the different libraries to rent out videotapes because he has to put together a film for Shakespeare. And keep in mind, this is probably very, very early 2000, like around 2000 or 2001.
Yeah.
It's not like there's YouTube or all sorts of video online. So the family spent weekends and weekdays going to different libraries to get the tapes he needed. And because of how Andrew and Patrick were raised on the idea of being independent to an extent, like whatever you're curious, you should go out and learn. The parents were able to support that environment where they give him laptop at a very young age to look up different information on their own and to really drive the independent thinker mindset from that point and on. So Andrew was able to go get all the different videotapes, put together a really great story, and had to learn about how to edit a video on the laptop at just 8 or 9 years old. So if that were to happen now, he would have been a YouTuber by then.
One of the earliest social influencers.
Oh yeah, totally. So really quickly, he was able to get all the information he needed, but he sort of waited until the last minute to finish the video, as all student would. So he had to spend the very last week to rush through the video, export it into VHS tape, and bring it to school.
Right.
But one thing that was very important, and he forgot, was he did not watch the video tape through on his own. So with this videotape, he added in all the different soundtrack, voiceover, visuals, everything, and he threw it into the final presentation. While everyone has a little presentation board, he has a video, so he played it. And there was a moment in the book he remarked that for a few seconds he thought his world sort of collapsed because the tape went dark. There was nothing for 5 seconds, and his heart just sank. He was like, dude, I put so much work into it. And there's 5 seconds, just nothing.
Yeah.
But luckily, the take came back. The video was finished. But potentially, because of that particular incident, he did not finish first. Because apparently, I think the prize at the time to finish first in that final presentation was a bunch of Shakespeare's memorabilia.
And he really wanted those.
He really wanted those. So he wanted the Trilobite fossil. Now he wanted all the Shakespeare work. Right. Really different from what an 8-9-year-old kid could want. So another girl in the class won, and he took that on the chin. He was like, "Yeah, man, I put in the work. I tried. It was on my own mistake that I did not check the tape. It's really on me, and she fully deserves it." At such a young age, he was able to, take an L relatively easily and had the ability to reflect right away. Was really impressive, and I think that does set the tone for what's to come for the next 20 years of his life.
Absolutely. So by around 9 or 10, Andrew again ran out of materials to learn, and he's basically finished all of the middle school courseworks. So the parents encouraged him to look for other resources for him to learn and begin his learning at a high school level. So Andrew and his family turned towards University of Nebraska, Lincoln, who was able to provide high school learning materials to homeschool kids. And this really was like a gift to Andrew. He was really able to accelerate his learning and at the same time find subjects that he is really interested in.
And I think it's important to note that it was a sort of environment where he can be responsible to himself and really be responsible for all the work and knowledge he wants to consume.
Correct. Yeah. And I feel like for his childhood, that has really been a theme. He's very eager to learn, but oftentimes he's limited. But like once he gets just a bit older, he finds another resource. It's kind of like unlocking another level to his learning. And then he like quickly completes that level again, right? So with the resources that the University of Nebraska-Lincoln provided, Andrew was able to take on high school coursework. So the way that the University of Nebraska-Lincoln program worked was they would literally mail you high school level textbooks. And I think a very interesting anecdote that Andrew shared in his book was that he was so excited to open up the boxes and tear open and look at the textbooks. That was just something that really stood out to me because I've never felt that way when I received textbooks, no matter which level, grade level that I was in. But yeah, so it wasn't online courses. It was really self-paced learning. And I think to a certain degree, that was actually a benefit to Andrew because he was able to pace his learning, which is very quick. So he was able to get all the textbooks that he wanted. Basically, he had a very packed schedule every single day. It was like 3 or 4 hours of learning in the morning and then a lunch, and then he would continue to do even more learning. And then it was swim practice and then more learning at night. So a lot of people may imagine homeschooling would be like an easy route, but for Andrew, it really wasn't because he was just that curious and he was just that eager to learn. Yeah, so with homeschooling, obviously there comes with certain inconveniences, especially when Andrew and Patrick had questions, right? So since they aren't enrolled into traditional high schools, they don't really have access to teachers. So if they couldn't find the answers at the library or online, what they had to do was basically have their parents drive them around different high schools within their neighborhood and just really try to engage with teachers and try to ask for answers to their questions. So when they met with these high school teachers, a lot of them were very reluctant to answer their questions. And then a few of them actually just told them to go away because they didn't pay tuition. They aren't enrolled in the high school. So at this point, Andrew felt very frustrated, right? Because he was facing invisible barriers here and there.
There's a quote Andrew absolutely adored since he was like 10 years old. He quoted Steve Jobs multiple times that life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. And I think subsequently, there was quite a few different other engagement opportunity, even TEDx speech that he did in Taiwan. And he continued to go back to this quote. Being turned away by high school teachers was one of the major sort of inspiration why he's so anchored to this quote. Because he feels like there's a system that's built to limit certain education or learning pacing, but he is much more capable than that. And he wants to break out of that particular, let's say, structure, construct. Right. And that's why he genuinely believes that he can learn at a much, much faster pace than what the quote-unquote system should be, because the system was designed by possibly people no smarter than himself, and he wanted to outgrow that. Because of his deep belief in the Steve Jobs quote that I shared just now, within 2 years' time, he also finished all the high school curriculums and don't know what to do now. He continued to want to sort of break into the next level. And at this point, you probably would have thought, oh, is it just the parents pushing him to do all the extra work, spend all the time studying? But no, like he did spend a handful of time playing video games. They go out to different hikes and different road trips as a family all the time. He's in Seattle, so it's very easy to get connected to all the different hiking trails and national parks. So there was a lot of other extracurricular activities too. And he even made a joke in the book that possibly without the parents sort of forcing him to do extracurricular activities, he probably would have finished college even at that point already,
Yeah.
right? It was more of a nerf to him. After all the high school works, he was already 12, and he started to look for collegiate level. Yes, he was going to University of Washington as a part-time student. That was a great environment, but ultimately what he wanted to do is to really become a full-time student at a university. But before that, it is important to note that it was around this time where Andrew's grandpa was experiencing dementia. And actually, Andrew and his younger brother, Patrick, when they were born, there were some medical complications for the mom, Joyce. So even though he was only 12, he was very driven to go into the biology field or the medical field. He even had a chapter in the book called I Want to Be a Doctor. That was his dream. That was his dream, to help people, potentially help people that experience the same condition as his grandpa, and help different mother who might not need to go through another medical complications when they're giving birth. So naturally, that led him to applying to all the different labs on the university level for biological research. And after writing to a handful of professors, only a few replied, because it's really getting a letter or an email from a 12 years old. And luckily, he was admitted to University of Washington's Dr. Peter Byers lab. And that's where he did his work in DNA sequencing at just 12 years old. This is really one of, many milestones to reach his dream, to continue to learn and continue to believe that he can do so much more than what he's capable of at that point. And the faculty and staff member are relatively supportive of him. They know of his brilliance. But you do have to imagine that in the lab, here's a 12 years old and a bunch of grad student and PhD student. Certainly Andrew stood out. His lab co-workers often was very cautious with him, just don't want him to hurt himself, or be very careful with all the delicate equipments in the lab. And this is around late January 2003. So what's remarkable was that by, I believe, April 2003, he was able to compete in Washington State Science and Engineering Fair with the DNA sequencing work that he did. And as a 12 years old, he had to go up against all sorts of different high schoolers that are also in that competition. And maybe it's because the work he did was very high level, very advanced. He did place second overall in the competition and won a bunch of individual awards for his category. So at that point, each state's first two place winners get to represent the state to go on to, they get to compete in Intel's Science and Engineering Fair on a global scale. And in 2003, that was held in Columbus, Ohio, I believe. He was named the youngest participant in the Intel competition and really made national highlight for the first time for his brilliance. And this is also a place where he met a lot of different Nobel Prize winners. A lot of them were the judges, and there were like different panels that were held to share those knowledge and the conversation with the high schoolers. And that's also another part where he was very eager to go to college, because what he saw at the end was on the stage, there was all the different high schoolers asking questions that he felt like he could ask an even better one, a more constructive ones, which he did go onto the mic and ask all the Nobel Prize winners in chemistry and biology all sorts of questions he wanted. Despite not winning anything in that competition, he did see that all the high schoolers on the stage being asked what they're going to do next, and all of them were going to colleges. A part of him felt like, man, that could have been me. I know so much more than they do. Why is it not me going to college right now? So that planted a seed in him to go back to Seattle with his parents and really strongly convince the parents that he should go. Before we talk about how he jumped into the University of Washington as a full-time student, Tim, can you walk us through what he did with his younger brother, Patrick, around a organization they co-founded at just 9 and 10 years old called World Children's Organization?
Yeah, so I guess to give a little bit of background, this whole organization was born, the idea of this organization was born out of the documentary that Andrew and his family watched when he was 10. This documentary documented all the less fortunate children around Southeast Asia, India, and the dire consequences that they were living in. So after the family viewed the documentary, the entire family felt very strongly to do something about it. And when I was reading this part, it really inspired me. I think there's one quote in the book Andrew said that really struck a chord. He said he's only 10, right? Like, and it's very hard to make a real impact by himself. But what his goal really is to do is to affect a group of people in order to make actual change. So from this concept, he and his brother founded the World Children's Organization. And I guess their epiphany was that education really is power. So what they felt like the most value that they could deliver was a system to learn English, which at the time was the most spoken language, and also to him was the key to unlocking opportunities that these kids desperately need. So Andrew and his brother began, obviously first you need funds to begin this endeavor. So the first one they turned to was his parents. And unsurprisingly, his parents are very supportive of this endeavor that Andrew and Patrick wanted to begin on. So Andrew and Patrick began to look around for children book writers, illustrators, and they wanted to develop a series of children's book that could very quickly allow children around the world to pick up on English. But at the same time, Andrew and Patrick also utilized their skills to make film and edit film. So they invited their neighbors and also at the time, Benjamin, his youngest brother, to come and make films of scenarios to allow children to watch these videos and quickly pick up on language that can be easily used in certain environments.
There's a footage that we found where Andrew was giving a speech in Taiwan, sharing all these work, and he did play a clip back in, that would have been 2005 or 2006, where it was just three siblings in the backyard, and Andrew and Patrick were doing a demo of a certain scenario, and the younger brother, Benjamin, was the one to play it out. And I thought that was very, very unique. It's like, that's such an interesting way to sort of deliver the right message in the right context, so that the viewer can actually understand what's going on and to pick up on the words in the sentence that they were trying to teach them.
Exactly. And going back to the books, when they finally collected all the written articles and illustrations, they had to figure out how to build together a 5-tier system of like A, B, C, D, E, which basically categorized, separated all the books into different difficulty levels, which is exactly like what Jonathan said at the beginning of the show. So if you're watching the video, level A would be something like a book, and level B would probably be something like a book and a table. Level C would probably be something like a book on the table, adding further complexity. As you climb the ladder, you just simply learn more and more vocabulary, application to the vocabulary.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that both of us grew up in the Taiwanese education system, and a lot of times we're forced to memorize. But I think the way Andrew and Patrick did it is that they give you a scenario.
Right.
And this scenario, they want you to help describe the scenario. So you're sort of memorizing the scenario. And by doing so, you sort of understand the terms that are being used a lot more easily. And really, that's what Speak is doing right now, is to give you all sorts of different scenarios. So when we read this part of the book, we thought, oh, wow, that's very, very interesting, because when they were 10 years old, that's what they were doing. And nearly 25 years later, that's exactly what Speak is doing too.
Yeah, simply amazing. And I think when I first learned about this, like learning situations instead of vocabulary, it is very refreshing. And I feel like it has a lot to do with how his upbringing was. His parents didn't force any learning on them. They were more like, the parents set up an environment where they were curious about a certain subject and allowed Andrew and his brothers to pursue that learning on their own.
Yeah, and I think the parents, Dave and Joyce, did an incredible job by, whenever they have questions, they don't normally just give them the answer right away, but encourage them to ask follow-up, clarifying questions, all of that, so that they know in the right context what sort of questions to ask. And I do think that's why, like I said earlier, when he went to Ohio to compete in the Intel's competition, he was able to ask really good questions to Nobel Prize winners,
Correct.
and to even have conversation with them. A side story to the Intel's competition was that he actually met a Harvard professor and also a Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Dudley Hirschbach. He struck a conversation with him at the competition, got his number, and they went out to get breakfast the next day and
Right.
essentially have a 2-3 hour long conversation. And I think that's all because for years, or literally most of his life at the time, as a 12 years old, he was encouraged to be curious about the certain scenarios they're in. And I think that was very instrumental in building out the children's book they had at the time under the World Children's Organization.
Right. So it is also important to note that it wasn't only just books that they produced. They produced short film and also audio for children all around the world to not only read, but also to listen, which was a very key skill that Andrew and Patrick valued, being able to pronounce words correctly. So it really shows that Andrew and Patrick went above and beyond for children who they've never met to provide the best resource and best opportunity for them. And they actually received a lot of letters from kids all around the world to say how appreciative they are for this effort.
Totally. Yeah, so I think with the World Children's Organization and mixing with his sort of national fame, after being the youngest participant ever at the Intel's Science and Engineering Fair, they were contacted by Jimmy Kimmel's team in 2003 about an appearance on the show. Even though Tim shared just now that they were watching a documentary, but growing up, they actually could not watch any TV.
Yeah.
So the entire family actually did not know who this person was. So because of it, so the mom had to go out and pay for the cable TV and realize, oh, wow, Jimmy Kimmel, your show is pretty late. And that's past my kid's bedtime.
Right.
He was like, that's probably not for my kids then.
Yeah.
So they turned it down. But he was like, Mr. Kimmel, even though I didn't get onto your show, but I'm thankful that because of you, now we got cable TV to watch.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
So bring it back to his journey towards becoming a full-time student at the University of Washington. Tim, walk us through what happened.
Yeah, so I think, again, when Andrew tried to move on to higher education, it's the same theme, right? He again faced a lot of challenges. But this time, it wasn't just about his age. It was also about safety. So when Andrew convinced his parents that he was going to go to college, he applied to NYU, Loyola, and pretty much all the Ivy League schools. But a lot of them turned him down simply because they didn't want to be responsible for Andrew's safety. As part of the college application process, there was this incredible mentor of Andrew's called Dr. Robert Bostrom, who Andrew met at a cafe. So it was actually a very interesting interaction. When Andrew first met Dr. Bostrom was reading a UK version of Financial Times. And Andrew walked up to him and asked if the UK version of the Financial Times had a different perspective compared to the US version of the Financial Times.
At 12 years old.
At 12 years old. This is a very intriguing question to ask. And being able to ask this question really shows that Andrew has a lot of experience, a lot of exposure to the US version of Financial Times. And when Dr. Bostrom heard Andrew's question, they basically engaged in an hour-long conversation that ultimately turned into a very close friendship between Andrew and Dr. Bostrom. So when Dr. Bostrom learned that Andrew was applying to colleges, he volunteered to write letter of recommendations for Andrew. Because of Dr. Bostrom's alma mater being Oxford University, he actually threatened all these universities that if they didn't take Andrew, he would recommend Oxford to take Andrew, and Oxford would definitely give that opportunity to Andrew.
As a joke, not a real threat.
Yeah, but even with that, actually a lot of universities turned him down, but eventually they got the call from University of Washington. At first, the admissions office didn't really want to take Andrew due to safety concerns, with Andrew's father really pushing for it, and Andrew being the unique kid that he is. University of Washington ultimately decided to allow him to enroll as a full-time student.
And I believe they even formed a special committee to review the case.
Yeah, Dr. Bostrom really convinced the committee to accept Andrew, and because of Dr. Bostrom, Andrew was able to be one of the youngest kids to ever attend University of Washington.
In the book, he also remarked that the first few years of his college life in University of Washington, Dr. Bostrom was one of the closer friends he had and was truly a mentor. Dr. Bostrom actually suggested Andrew that course is not everything. You should still split the work 65 to 35, 35 being sort of leisure and extracurricular activity to explore different things. And he really took that advice to heart. That being said, he still enrolled like close to 30 credit hours for a first year college student at 12 or 13 years old, which is still insane. But ultimately, Andrew considered Dr. Bostrom as one of the closest friend he had at the time and a true mentor. Unfortunately, Dr. Bostrom passed away in late 2005 over a car accident, I believe. That really taught Andrew how short life could be and continued to drive him and cherish the time he has on Earth, essentially. Now, during the interview, we did talk about how Dr. Bostrom might have asked him or said to him. I think, gracefully, he did say he'll be very proud of him.
So by the time Andrew was done at University of Washington, he actually earned 3 degrees and a minor and quickly wanted to learn even more. So he decided to he decided to apply to grad school and then ultimately decided to go to Stanford University to do neuroscience. His decision to do neuroscience was basically due to his grandfather's conditions. Just based on his track record, we could already predict, right? He finished his master's degrees within record time. By year 3, Andrew was a PhD candidate, but he constantly asked himself what his life's purpose would be. Did he really want to spend his entire life in academia, or did he want to go out and build something that would affect humans on a larger scale? So he decided to apply to the Teal Fellowship.
It happened to be the first year.
Yeah, being the first class Teal Fellowship, which at the time was actually called 20 under 20, and then decided to drop out of Stanford University and began his entrepreneurship journey.
There's this very interesting scene that he described, walking down Palm Drive in Stanford for the final time as a student and looked back at Palm Drive thinking of what sort of next journey he's going to embark on.
Right.
And I feel like I should have asked him in the interview what he would have said to that Andrew back in the time if he were to be standing on Palm Drive too. I just thought that it was so beautifully described towards the end of the book when he was standing there, sort of making this life's decision to drop out, to pursue the entrepreneurship journey, or to continue to stay in academia.
Yeah, and I think the very last sentence of that specific chapter was his announcement to Silicon Valley that he's here, he's arrived. He's made that decision to go ahead with that. With the Teal Fellowship grant that he received, he started his first entrepreneurship project, which is called Airy Labs. Airy Labs was basically an extension of what Patrick and Andrew has been doing with the World Children Organization.
This would be around 2011, 2012. That's sort of the beginning phase of mobile era. iPhone was just coming out, Android was coming out, HTC phone was still a thing. What Andrew wanted to do with Airy Lab was simply through iPhones or mobile phones as a medium to build mobile games that help children learn different subjects a lot easier in a more interactive way. I think that's what we can imagine of. Unfortunately, within a couple of years, they weren't able to find product market fit, so that quickly went away. In the conversation we had with Andrew, he shared that it was very public, and it was a lot of negative media. So think of from 12 years old and beyond, it was all very positive. He was a child prodigy. He was on local news. He was the youngest participant in the Intel's competition, youngest ever to graduate University of Washington with 3 degrees, and essentially drop out as a PhD candidate. Like, all that was very, very positive. But the failed startup was really a massive wake-up call that, okay, being in the spotlight has a lot of responsibility, and every move you make is essentially carefully scrutinized. In the subsequent years, he did a few different ideas before leading up to Speak. But really, when we look back at the book and his life's journey, it's a very consistent theme. Sure, he wanted to go into the medical field because of the family. But really what he's been passionate about since 10 years old was about bringing education making it accessible to anyone in the world. He first did that with the organization, writing books, different scenarios in there, having audio, having video. And then with the Airy Labs, building mobile apps, sort of in the similar interactive games way to still enable the kids to learn. And now with Speak, it's still the same thing. It's mobile app. Yes, it's AI. It's a next iteration from mobile phone, the typical apps. But they built in so many different scenarios in there to help their users learn a different language, right? It can be ordering at a taco truck. It can be ordering at Chipotle. It can be going to Costco, buying food, buying groceries. It can be being at an airport, asking for direction, being at Central Station in New York, how to get onto the right train on time. Like all of those scenarios and all of those sort of mission that he had, it can really be traced back to when he was just 10 years old, when he saw how education can impact one's life. And I think it's really inspiring for what he can achieve at just 34 years old now in 2025. It's been something that he's been pursuing for more than 2 decades. And that's why we feel so strongly about sharing this book with everyone, because this is really a huge piece to, I guess, his overall story. A lot of the things he wrote in there are still true to this day. The book was first published when he was just 13, 14 years old. I think he got an invitation from a publisher in Taiwan to write it. He wrote it in English, sent the copies back to Taiwan, and they have it translated. And the book title is called Not Just a Genius. The first edition came out in 2005, and the second edition came out around 2012-ish, when he got into Teal Fellowship and when he first started doing Airy Labs. I think Steve Jobs still put it really well, right? You can only connect the dots looking backwards to really make sense. And somehow it just feels like Andrew has always known what those dots are, what the end goals are, and he's just been building towards it for close to 25 years at this point, despite being in his early 30s.
Yeah.
So it's just an incredible story, and maybe that's why Speak has such a strong conviction on what they should do to help people to learn English, and why they're one of the most talked about AI app in the world.
Yeah, so I think the story is extremely consistent since he was a kid. But yeah, like you said, you really can only connect the dots looking back. And I think the North Star for Andrew was always there. It was really allowing children to learn and enabling children to learn. I think that really is his key mission.
And also a huge shout out and kudos to the parents, David and Joyce, for fostering that environment for Andrew, Patrick, and Benjamin to really grow up in such a supportive way and really pique all the curiosity they had from a very early age. And I think that's really why they're able to achieve so much today, despite really being young. So if you haven't had a chance to watch or listen to our full conversation with Andrew, go check it out now. I know most of the time we do Mandarin content, but English content is something that we're pushing for as well. We're trying to figure out how that really fit into our overall show. If you found our show helpful, share with a friend, like and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time. Bye.